Loneliness is not a verdict on your worth as a man, yet many men treat it exactly like that. They feel the quiet and immediately assume something is wrong with them, that they are unlovable, falling behind, or failing at life. This belief is what turns loneliness from a feeling into a weakness. In reality, loneliness is a signal, not a sentence. It is information. It is your inner world telling you that something needs to be acknowledged, examined, or redirected. Ignoring that signal doesn't make you stronger. It only allows the problem to deepen in the dark. Men are often conditioned to believe that strength means emotional silence. From an early age, many are taught to endure rather than understand. If you're lonely, you're told to man up, distract yourself, or keep moving. But loneliness doesn't disappear when you outrun it, it waits. And when it's ignored long enough, it starts influencing your behavior in ways you don't notice at first. Lower standards, weaker discipline, poor choices, and quiet resentment toward the world. None of that happens because you are weak. It happens because the signal went unanswered. Loneliness usually appears during moments of transition. When you outgrow old habits, old circles, or old versions of yourself, there is often a gap before something new replaces them. That gap can feel empty and uncomfortable, but it doesn't mean you are broken. It means you are between identities. Many men misinterpret this phase and panic, trying to immediately fill the space with noise, attention, or validation. But rushing to escape loneliness often traps you in situations that keep you stuck rather than helping you grow. When you stop seeing loneliness as a flaw, you gain the ability to learn from it. Ask yourself what it is pointing toward. Is it showing you that your life lacks direction, that your relationships lack depth, that you've been neglecting your own growth? Loneliness often surfaces when a man is disconnected from his values, his mission, or his sense of progress. It's not asking you to hate yourself, it's asking you to realign yourself. There is also an important distinction between feeling lonely and being alone. Being alone is a physical state. Loneliness is a psychological one. You can be surrounded by people and still feel invisible if your life lacks meaning or authenticity. That's why chasing constant company doesn't solve the problem. Until you address the inner cause, external fixes only provide temporary relief. The loneliness returns, often stronger, because the real message was never heard. Accepting loneliness without shame is an act of strength. It requires honesty. It requires sitting with discomfort instead of numbing it. When you do this, loneliness stops being an enemy and starts becoming a teacher. It shows you where you need to grow, what you need to change, and what you've been avoiding. Men who learn to listen to this signal instead of judging themselves for it build this quiet confidence, the kind that doesn't depend on approval or attention. Loneliness does not mean you are failing as a man. It means something inside you is asking for growth, purpose, or connection that aligns with who you are becoming. The moment you stop labeling loneliness as weakness, you stop being controlled by it. And once that happens, it loses its power to break you and begins serving its real role, to push you forward. Many men believe that loneliness would disappear if they simply had more people around them. A relationship, a wider social circle, more attention, these are often seen as the cure. But this belief hides a deeper truth. Loneliness is not always about the absence of others. It is often about the absence of direction. A man without purpose can feel deeply lonely even when surrounded by people, while a man with a clear mission can endure long stretches of solitude without losing his sense of self. Purpose gives loneliness context. Without it, the silence feels empty. With it, the silence becomes productive. When a man lacks direction, his mind has nothing solid to rest on. In that mental vacuum, doubt creeps in. He begins to compare himself to others, question his value, and replay past mistakes. Time starts to feel heavy instead of useful. This is why idle time can be so dangerous. It amplifies loneliness by giving your thoughts too much room to wander without guidance. Purpose, on the other hand, anchors your mind. It gives your days a reason to exist beyond simply passing time. Purpose does not have to be grand or dramatic. Many men wait for some massive calling before they commit to anything, and in that waiting, loneliness grows. Purpose can be simple and immediate, improving your health, building a skill, advancing your career, strengthening your character, or working toward financial stability. What matters is that it is chosen deliberately and pursued consistently. When you wake up knowing what you are working toward, loneliness loses its grip because your energy is directed forward rather than inward. This is why relationships alone cannot save a man from loneliness. When a man enters relationships without purpose, he often turns the other person into his emotional anchor. He begins to rely on attention and validation to feel okay. This creates pressure, insecurity, and imbalance, and it often pushes people away. Ironically, the more he seeks connection to escape loneliness, the more alone he becomes. Purpose protects you from this trap by ensuring that your sense of worth is not outsourced to others. A man with purpose carries himself differently. His time has value. His attention is not scattered. He doesn't chase connection out of desperation. He allows it to form naturally around his path. Even when he feels lonely, that loneliness does not define him. It becomes a temporary emotion rather than a permanent identity. This inner stability is attractive not because it demands attention, but because it doesn't need it to survive. There is also strength in learning to sit with solitude while building something meaningful. Solitude gives you clarity. It removes noise and reveals what truly matters to you. Many men fear being alone because, in the quiet, they are forced to confront themselves. But that confrontation is exactly where growth begins. Purpose gives that confrontation a direction, turning self-reflection into self-improvement rather than self-criticism. Ultimately, dealing with loneliness is less about filling space with people and more about filling life with meaning. When your days are aligned with a clear direction, loneliness becomes manageable, even useful. It signals when you need rest, adjustment, or deeper connection, but it no longer weakens you. Purpose transforms loneliness from a draining force into a reminder that you are moving toward something that matters. And that movement is what keeps a man strong. Loneliness becomes most dangerous when a man doesn't understand how he is using his time alone. There is a critical difference between solitude and isolation, and confusing the two is where many men slowly weaken without realizing it. Solitude is intentional. It is chosen. It is time spent alone for the purpose of growth, clarity, and strength. Isolation, on the other hand, is passive. It is endured, not selected. It is what happens when a man withdraws from the world, not to build himself, but to escape, numb, or disappear. The room may look the same in both cases, but what happens inside that room determines the outcome. A man in solitude uses silence as a tool. He trains his body, sharpens his mind, and reflects on his life with honesty. He may still feel lonely at times, but that loneliness doesn't control him. It becomes background noise while he focuses on becoming better. In isolation, however, silence turns against him. His thoughts loop endlessly. He revisits regrets, compares himself to others, and slowly convinces himself that he is stuck. Time passes, but nothing improves. This is how loneliness quietly erodes confidence and discipline. The danger of isolation is that it often disguises itself as comfort. Endless scrolling, binge watching, late nights, and constant distraction feel harmless in the moment. They provide temporary relief from the discomfort of being alone. But afterward, the emptiness feels even heavier. This cycle trains the mind to avoid discomfort instead of mastering it. Over time, avoidance becomes habit, and habit becomes identity. A man who consistently avoids discomfort loses his edge, not because he lacks strength, but because he never uses it. Solitude requires structure. Without structure, alone time quickly drifts into isolation. You don't need a rigid schedule, but you do need intention. Decide how your alone time will serve you. Physical training is one of the most powerful ways to convert loneliness into strength. When you push your body, you remind yourself that discomfort is survivable and effort leads somewhere. Reading, learning, journaling, and planning also turn quiet time into something constructive. These actions give your mind direction instead of letting it spiral. There is also courage in staying connected while alone. Choosing solitude does not mean cutting yourself off from the world. It means being selective. It means limiting low-quality interactions while remaining open to meaningful ones. Isolation convinces you that no one understands you, that reaching out is weakness, and that staying silent is safer. Solitude knows when to step back and when to engage. A strong man does not vanish. He recalibrates. Many men fear solitude because it forces them to face who they are without distractions. But this confrontation is not a punishment. It is an opportunity. When you sit with yourself long enough, patterns become clear. You begin to see what is holding you back, what you've been avoiding, and what needs to change. Isolation hides these truths. Solitude reveals them. If loneliness is going to be part of your life, and at times it will be, you must decide what role it plays. Used incorrectly, it weakens you slowly and silently. Used correctly, it becomes a training ground. The same silence that breaks one man becomes the forge that hardens another. The difference is not luck or personality, it is choice. Loneliness grows strongest where honesty is weakest. Many men carry their loneliness in silence, believing that speaking about it would make them look fragile, needy, or lesser. So they compress it, hide it behind humor, productivity, or indifference, and tell themselves they're fine. But unexpressed emotion doesn't disappear, it settles. It sinks into the body and the mind, shaping behavior in subtle ways. What a man refuses to name eventually begins to control him. The idea that strength means emotional suppression is one of the most damaging lessons men absorb. Strength is not the absence of feeling. It is the ability to face feeling without being ruled by it. Loneliness that is acknowledged loses its sharp edge. Loneliness that is denied becomes toxic. When a man never gives his inner world a voice, that inner world starts leaking out through irritability, withdrawal, impulsive decisions, or quiet self-destruction. He may not even realize what's happening. He only knows something feels off. Honest expression does not mean complaining endlessly or seeking pity. It means telling the truth without exaggeration or performance. It means being able to say, "I feel disconnected," or "I'm struggling," without attaching shame to those words. For many men, this is uncomfortable at first because it requires vulnerability, and vulnerability feels like risk. But the greater risk is pretending everything is fine while slowly losing yourself on the inside. Every man needs at least one outlet where he can be real. This doesn't have to be a large group or a dramatic conversation. It could be a trusted friend who listens without judgment. It could be writing in a journal where thoughts can surface without being filtered. It could be prayer, reflection, or speaking honestly to a mentor. The form matters less than the act. Expression is how pressure is released. Without release, pressure builds. and eventually something gives. There is also power in hearing your own truth out loud. When thoughts stay trapped in your head, they feel bigger and heavier than they actually are. Once expressed, they become clearer and more manageable. You begin to separate facts from fears, reality from assumption. Loneliness often convinces men that they are uniquely broken, that everyone else has it figured out. Honest expression breaks that illusion. It reminds you that struggle is part of being human, not evidence of failure. Men often wait until loneliness turns into anger, numbness, or exhaustion before they speak. By then, the damage is deeper. Expressing yourself early is an act of discipline, not weakness. It is choosing to deal with what's real instead of letting it rot beneath the surface. This kind of honesty actually builds self-respect because you are no longer abandoning yourself to maintain an image. Importantly, expression must be paired with responsibility. Speaking your truth is not about blaming others or surrendering control. It is about clarity. Once you name what you feel, you can decide what to do about it. Loneliness acknowledged becomes loneliness managed. Loneliness ignored becomes loneliness multiplied. A man who can sit with his emotions, understand them, and express them appropriately becomes internally stable. He no longer fears quiet moments because he knows how to process what arises in them. In that stability, loneliness loses its power to weaken him. It may still visit, but it no longer owns him. Loneliness often pushes men toward choices that feel relieving in the moment, but damaging in the long run. When a man feels unseen or disconnected, his mind starts searching for anything that can quickly numb that discomfort. This is where loneliness becomes dangerous. Not because of the feeling itself, but because of the behaviors it quietly encourages. Without awareness, a man can begin trading long-term strength for short-term comfort, slowly eroding his discipline and self-respect. One of the most common traps is chasing validation. Attention from the wrong people, shallow relationships, or constant external approval can feel like proof that you matter. But validation gained this way is unstable. It fades quickly and demands more each time. Instead of filling the emptiness, it deepens it, because your sense of worth becomes dependent on something you can't control. Loneliness convinces men to lower their standards just to avoid being alone. But every time you abandon your standards, you teach yourself that your values are negotiable. Addictions often grow from this same root. Endless scrolling, pornography, alcohol, drugs, gambling, or even overworking can all become ways to avoid sitting with loneliness. These habits don't begin as destruction. They begin as escape. The problem is that escape delays growth. Each time you numb the discomfort instead of confronting it, you weaken your ability to tolerate challenge. Over time, discomfort feels unbearable, even in small doses, and discipline collapses. A man who cannot sit with discomfort loses control of his choices. Loneliness can also push men into self-sabotage. When you feel disconnected, it's easy to believe that progress doesn't matter, that effort is pointless, or that you're already behind. This mindset drains motivation. You skip workouts, procrastinate on goals, and neglect responsibilities. Then the lack of progress reinforces the loneliness, creating a cycle that feeds itself. The danger here is subtle. It doesn't feel dramatic, just slowly draining. One missed commitment at a time, a man begins drifting away from the person he knows he could be. This is why discipline is not optional when dealing with loneliness. Discipline creates boundaries between emotion and action. It ensures that feelings do not dictate behavior. You may feel lonely, but you still train. You may feel disconnected, but you still show up for your work. You may feel empty, but you still keep your word to yourself. These actions don't erase loneliness, but they prevent it from weakening you. They remind you that you are still in control. Physical discipline is especially powerful. When you push your body, you anchor yourself in reality. You feel effort, resistance, and progress. Training teaches you that discomfort does not equal danger, it equals growth. Proper sleep, nutrition, and movement stabilize your mood and sharpen your mind, making loneliness easier to manage. A neglected body amplifies emotional pain. A disciplined body absorbs it. The key is not to eliminate loneliness overnight, but to prevent it from steering your life. Every time you choose discipline over escape, you reclaim a piece of your strength. Loneliness loses its grip when it no longer controls your actions. You stop asking, "How do I make this feeling go away?" and start asking, "What choice keeps me strong right now?" When a man learns to recognize the urges loneliness creates and refuses to obey the ones that weaken him, he transforms the experience. Loneliness no longer pulls him downward. It becomes a test of character, and each time he passes that test, he emerges more grounded, more self-respecting, and more resilient than before. Loneliness often feels like something permanent when you are in the middle of it, as if this quiet distance from others is simply who you are now. But for many men, loneliness is not a final destination. It is a transition. It appears during periods of growth, change, and separation from old versions of life. Understanding this changes how you relate to it. Instead of seeing loneliness as proof that something is wrong, you begin to recognize it as a sign that something is shifting. Growth almost always creates distance. When you start taking your life more seriously, certain friendships fade. When you change your habits, your environment changes. When you raise your standards, fewer people fit easily into your world. This narrowing can feel isolating, especially at first. But it is often necessary. A man cannot become stronger without shedding what no longer aligns with who he is becoming. Loneliness frequently fills that gap between the old and the new. The danger is mistaking this phase for an end point. When men believe their loneliness will never end, they stop investing in themselves. They lose patience. They rush into situations just to escape the feeling. Relationships, commitments, identities that don't truly fit. This slows growth and prolongs the loneliness. When you understand that loneliness can be temporary, you regain patience. You stop forcing outcomes and start focusing on preparation. This period is an opportunity to refine yourself. Without constant social noise, you can see more clearly. You notice your strengths and your weaknesses. You recognize patterns that kept you stuck before. Loneliness creates space for self-assessment that busy, crowded lives often prevent. If you use the space well, you don't just survive it, you emerge changed. Men who grow through loneliness develop a deep internal stability. They learn how to be at peace with themselves, how to self-regulate, and how to move forward without external reassurance. This makes future connections healthier, not desperate. When companionship returns, and it usually does, it complements your life instead of defining it. You are no longer looking for someone to complete you. You are choosing people who align with you. It's also important to remember that strength built in loneliness stays with you. Confidence earned in isolation is quieter but more durable. You know you can stand on your own. You know you can endure uncomfortable seasons without collapsing. This knowledge becomes part of your identity. It prevents future loneliness from hitting as hard, because you've already proven to yourself that you can handle it. Loneliness only becomes destructive when it is wasted. When you spend it resisting reality, numbing pain, or resenting the world, it drains you. When you spend it building discipline, clarity, and direction, it strengthens you. The experience itself does not determine the outcome, your response does. Every strong man has faced periods where no one was clapping, checking in, or paying attention. Those periods did not break him, they shaped him. They taught him patience, self-trust, and resilience. Loneliness refined him in ways comfort never could. If you are in that season now, don't rush to escape it. Don't label it as failure. Treat it as training. Keep showing up for yourself. Keep building even when it feels quiet and unseen. One day you will look back and realize that the loneliness you once feared was the ground on which your strength was built.